A woman stood alone in the pouring rain, thrown out of the only place she had left in this world because she refused to sell her body. She had no money, no family, no phone call that could save her. The manager who fired her was inside laughing, convinced he had just erased another problem. But what he did not know was that the man sitting in the black SUV watching from across the street owned every single brick of that building. And within the next 12 hours, that manager would lose his job, his freedom, and everything he had built on the backs of desperate women. One question from a stranger in a rainstorm was about to burn an entire empire of exploitation to the ground. This story is proof that standing up for your dignity, even when it costs you everything, is never a mistake. Sometimes the moment you lose it all is the exact moment the right person finally sees you. Stay until the end, because what happens to Olivia will remind you why courage is never wasted. If you have not subscribed yet, do it now so you do not miss stories like this one. Hit the notification bell, and while you are at it, drop a comment telling me where in the world you are watching from. I love reading every single one. Now let us go back to that rainy night. The rain that night felt like a judgment, relentless and cold, soaking her black work shirt until it clung to her like a second skin. Olivia wandered with no destination, one arm clutched around her body for warmth, the other hand gripping her olive green bag as if it were her only anchor. The dilapidated street stretched before her, its lights flickering against the downpour and casting faint yellow circles on the broken pavement. She was weeping without shame now, no longer concerned with who might see. Her dark hair was plastered in wet strands to her face. The beige apron she had to wear for every shift was still tied at her waist, limp and creased. She wore black pants and cheap sneakers that made a squishing sound with every single step. She was a perfect image of what she had become. A woman with absolutely nowhere else to turn. For 8 months, she had been an employee at the Eclipse Lounge. 8 months she had spent serving drinks to men whose eyes stayed on her for too long. Men who offered her money with silent propositions, and men who believed a polite smile was a form of consent. For 8 months, she had kept her eyes down, performed her duties, and rejected all other offers. It had not been enough. With the job came a room upstairs that was not much bigger than a closet. But it was her own. It held a mattress on the floor, a single lamp, and a lock for the door. That lock was important. It signified that she was a waitress, not an item for sale. It meant she could refuse and still have a roof over her head. But tonight, her refusals had finally caught up with her. The club's manager, a tall man in a tailored suit who always smiled as if he held a secret, had started bringing in different girls 3 weeks ago. He referred to them as dancers. But Olivia knew the truth. She had seen the private back rooms, she had overheard the deals, and she had watched cash being exchanged for services that were not drinks. He made his move on her last week. "You have a marketable look," he had told her, leaning on the bar as she polished glasses. "The customers are asking for you. You could be making serious cash." She had turned him down with courtesy. He continued to push. She turned him down once more. Tonight, he was finished with asking. "Pack your things," he had ordered, appearing in her doorway without warning. "Your time here is over." What? Why? If you refuse to work, you refuse to stay. "I am working. Not in the way that I need you to." She tried to protest. She tried to state that her only agreement was to serve drinks. But he had already dismissed her. He had already summoned 2 security men to see her out. They granted her 5 minutes to pack her life into a bag. Then they escorted her down the service stairs, through the kitchen, and into the back alley, just as the rain began to fall. The door locked behind her. There was no final paycheck, no apology, and no second chance. There was only the rain. She walked because walking was the only option. She had no family to contact, no friends she could call in the middle of the night. The small amount of money she had saved was in her bag. It might cover a week at a hostel if she was fortunate, but maybe it would not. The street lamps buzzed and blinked above her, some of them completely burnt out, leaving huge portions of the street engulfed in darkness. Cars drove by from time to time, their headlights piercing the rain, but not one of them ever slowed down. This was not the kind of area where anyone stopped to offer help. Olivia did not hold it against them. She just kept moving, one foot after the other, as the rain poured over her face and mixed with the tears she no longer tried to suppress. Her throat was tight, and her chest felt heavy. She had fought so hard to protect her dignity, to set a boundary and defend it, and in the end, it had taken everything from her. That is when she noticed it. The deep growl of an engine getting slower behind her. She did not turn her head. Women in her situation learn not to. But the noise did not go away. It got nearer, clearer, more purposeful. The black luxury SUV moved up beside her, enormous and sleek, with rain sliding down its perfect surface like liquid silver. It was the type of vehicle that was completely out of place here. It was too valuable, too pristine, and too imposing. The windows were tinted so dark that they were like black mirrors. It moved at her exact speed. Olivia's heart hammered. She walked more quickly. The SUV matched her. She stopped. The SUV stopped. For a long second, nothing moved. There was only the sound of the rain hitting the asphalt and the low purr of the engine. Olivia stood motionless, soaked through, her bag held tightly to her chest. Her heart was pounding so violently, she felt it in her throat. Then, the back window slid down with a slow, deliberate hum. Inside sat a man in a tailored black suit, the kind of suit that was worth more than her entire year's wages. His shirt was a crisp white, unbuttoned at the top, with no tie. His face was all sharp angles, hardened, with dark eyes that did not blink, did not soften, and did not look away. He had the kind of aura that could dominate a space without him ever moving a muscle. He was dangerous, controlled, and undeniably powerful. He did not offer a smile. He did not move closer. He just looked at her as if he were calculating if she was worth his time. Then he spoke. What happened? His voice was quiet and low, but it sliced through the sound of the storm like a razor. Olivia's breath hitched in her throat. She should have kept moving. She should have pretended not to hear him. She should have listened to every survival instinct that was screaming inside her. But she remained where she was. Maybe it was the sheer exhaustion. Maybe it was her utter desperation. Or maybe it was the way he asked the question, without demand or pity, just a simple inquiry, as if he genuinely wanted an answer. She turned to face him completely, rain streaming down her cheeks. And for the first time that entire night, someone was looking at her as if she was a person. Her voice broke. She swallowed and tried again. I lost my job. The man's expression did not flicker. He continued to study her, his eyes moving from her drenched uniform to her bag, and then to the tears she could no longer conceal. He told her to get in the car. Olivia went rigid. The night was dark, the kind that screamed at you not to accept rides from men in fancy vehicles. But she was drenched, defeated, and had nowhere else to turn. A look in his eyes warned her that refusing him could be her final error. She did not enter the vehicle immediately. She remained in the downpour, rain tracing paths down her cheeks as she eyed the open door. It looked like a carefully set trap. Inside, everything was pristine black leather, completely dry. A wave of warmth escaped, bringing with it the smell of rich cologne and something more potent, like authority. Or maybe dominance. He remained patient. He did not ask again or try to convince her. He simply watched her, his face a mask, an arm resting on his leg as she weighed her choice. I cannot, Olivia began, but her voice failed. I have never met you. He conceded with a nod. No, you have not. What reason do you have to help me? A muscle in his cheek twitched. I have not yet determined if I will. His candor was shocking. Other men made false promises of security and comfort, offering things they never meant to give. This man gave her only the option of a dry place to sit and an unspoken challenge. Olivia glanced along the vacant street. There was only the storm, the night, and no escape. She entered the car. the door shut with a heavy, definitive sound. Instantly, the downpour became a muted beat on the ceiling. The heat enveloped her, and she understood she was trembling from the cold. He ignored her, rapping twice on the divider to the driver. The vehicle glided back into traffic. "Where are you taking me?" Olivia's voice was a faint murmur. "That is for you to say." She had no response. It was then he turned to her, truly looking at her. And for the first time, she got a clear view of his face. He had dark hair, slightly wet around the edges, as if he had been in the rain himself a short time ago. He had strong features, with a thin, white scar cutting across his left eyebrow. He looked to be around 40, maybe older. It was difficult to say. Men with his kind of power do not age in the same way. They become weathered. "You worked at the Eclipse Lounge," he said. It was a statement, not a question. Olivia's heart went still. "How did you know?" "The apron." He gestured to her waist. "And I am familiar with the uniform." She glanced down. The beige apron was still tied around her, with the faded black logo of the Eclipse stitched across the front. She had completely forgotten she was still wearing it. "I am taking it off," she said hurriedly, her fingers fumbling with the knot. "Leave it." She froze. "I want to see it when we get there," he added. "Get where?" But he had already looked away. He pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen with a swift, practiced motion. He made a call and spoke in rapid Portuguese, so quiet she missed most of the words. But she caught one perfectly. Eclipse. A lead weight formed in her gut. "We are returning to that place." Her statement was pure fear, not a question. He finished his conversation and met her gaze. "You have a problem with returning?" "Yes." She struggled to speak. "I was dismissed. They cast me out. I am forbidden to be there." "Who dismissed you?" "It was the manager. I am not sure of his actual name. They all refer to him as Señor." An emotion crossed the man's features, but it was not shock. It was something much harder. "For what reason were you dismissed?" Olivia paused. This was the confession that painted her as a fool who did not grasp the way things really are. "Because I refused." Her voice faded as she looked down at her lap. "He demanded things beyond pouring beverages." A quiet moment passed. "And you said no?" the man asked softly. "I did." "How long did this go on?" "For 3 weeks, possibly longer." He began pressuring me after the new dancers arrived. The man settled into his seat, his gaze sharpening. "Tell me about these new dancers." "He called them dancers," Olivia explained, changing her wording. At least that was his term for them. But their work involved more than just performing on stage. What else were they tasked with? She was hesitant to give voice to it, to be the one to state the ugly truth. Yet his look was unwavering, expectant. "Servicing customers," she answered with caution. "In the secluded suites on the upper level." "The level where you had your room?" Olivia confirmed with a nod. The man's face remained a mask, but the energy in the car changed, sharpening with a new focus. He took out his phone, sent a message, and concealed it again. "Your residence was above the establishment," he stated. "I was provided a room upon my hiring. That was the arrangement. I handle the bar, and in return, I have a place to stay. And when you refuse to provide more," he observed, his tone devoid of emotion, "they revoked your housing." "That is correct, this evening." "Yes." He was silent for a considerable time, watching the wet city streets pass by the window. Olivia could not decipher his expression. She had no idea if he trusted her story, if he felt any sympathy, or if any of her ordeal made a difference to him. At last, his silence broke. "What was the duration of your employment?" 8 months. "Were you aware of the establishment's nature when you took the job?" "I understood it was a lounge." "I understood it was not." She stopped, seeking the proper description. "I understood the environment was dangerous, but I was desperate for a job. They gave me their word that my only duty was to be a server." That was the only thing I consented to. And you honored that deal. I made an effort. You were successful, he corrected her. That is the reason you are sitting here now. Olivia stared at him, bewildered. I do not see what you mean. He did not reply immediately, but observed her with his deep, mysterious gaze. He then shifted forward, resting his arms on his legs and linking his fingers. The Eclipse Lounge, he stated deliberately, is more than a simple club. I am aware. No, you are not. His tone became more serious. It is a cover for other operations. Currency flows through it, people flow through it. Forbidden activities take place there, and an individual is tasked with preventing those things from occurring. Olivia felt her mouth become parched. Who is that person? A smile touched the man's lips, but it held no comfort. I am. The admission felt like a weapon suspended between them. Olivia's grip on her purse intensified. She had no idea of this man's identity, but she now grasped the reason for the luxury vehicle. The reason his clothes were tailored so perfectly. The reason people likely avoided his path. You are the owner of the Eclipse, she breathed. I am the owner of many ventures, he replied, leaning back. The Eclipse is merely one, and if your account is accurate, then an employee has been managing my establishment as if it were his own. It is accurate, Olivia insisted. I promise I am telling the truth. I am certain you are. How can you be sure? He motioned in her direction. Because your server apron is still on. Because you are drenched and weeping with no destination. Because dishonest women rarely find themselves stranded and alone in a storm. The vehicle began to decelerate. Olivia gazed outside and her stomach twisted into a knot. They had returned. Ahead of them loomed the Eclipse Lounge. Its vibrant signs cast reflections of rose and sapphire on the slick asphalt. A low beat radiated from within the building. Groups of people gathered outside, sharing cigarettes and jokes, completely unaware. I cannot enter that place, Olivia pleaded, her anxiety swelling. He will not harm you, the man assured her as he opened his door. Remain by my side. Say nothing until I instruct you. For what reason have we come back? He gave her a final look before exiting into the downpour. Because I wish to have a word with the individual who believes he is in charge of my establishment. Olivia remained frozen in her seat. The man was outside the vehicle, the rain beginning to stain the fabric of his costly suit as he waited. The door was still ajar. The club's music throbbed in the darkness, a heavy and persistent rhythm meant to obscure unwanted words. I cannot do it, she repeated, her voice softer now. He bent down, placing a hand on the frame of the door. You are able, and you are going to. He will know who I am. He will be powerless to act. The conviction in his tone was unshakable. Not as long as you are with me. Olivia's fingers shook as she clutched her bag. Her entire being urged her to remain in the vehicle, to beg the driver for a ride to any other location, to vanish into the storm forever. Yet the decision was made the moment she accepted the ride. She had already placed her faith in this man with the cold gaze and veiled warnings. She exited the car into the storm. He shut the door and began moving toward the entrance of the lounge. Olivia rushed to match his pace, her wet shoes making sounds in the standing water, her apron a badge of her recent dismissal. She felt shamefully visible, certain everyone outside would identify her as the employee who was just ejected, but not one person glanced her way. All eyes were on him. The chatter by the door ceased abruptly. Smokers froze with cigarettes held in midair. A lady in a form-fitting crimson gown instinctively moved away. The two bouncers at the entrance, both massive and covered in ink, who were normally like statues, snapped to attention. Senor Race, one of them stated, his voice strained. The man, Race, paid them no mind, striding by as if they were objects. Olivia trailed behind him, her gaze fixed on the floor, her pulse racing. The security team did not challenge her or even acknowledge her presence. They kept their focus entirely on Race until he passed through the doorway. Within the club, The sound was an overwhelming force. It pushed on Olivia's ribs, resonated deep inside her, and clouded her thoughts. The venue was filled with people, forms swaying on the dance floor, while flashing lights sliced through a haze of smoke. Servers hurried behind the expansive marble bar where she had worked for the last 8 months, the very bar where she had been deemed insufficient. Race navigated the dense crowd with an effortless authority that made a path appear before him. The crowd shifted to let him pass, guided by an unspoken impulse to clear his path. Olivia kept near, the damp fabric of her work clothes sticking to her purse held tightly against her body. She recognized the faces of co-workers and patrons she had assisted. Not one of them would look at her. They either failed to see her or chose to ignore her. And then she spotted him. Senor. He was positioned by the exclusive area, smiling at a remark from a woman in a shimmering gown. He was tall, with a polished charm, and dressed in a tailored black suit. His dark hair was combed back, and his expression was relaxed and self-assured. He was a man who expected obedience from the world because he had never known otherwise. He was still unaware of their arrival. Race paused just beyond the dance floor, his hands in his pockets. He scanned the room like a man examining a possession he had long since put out of his mind. His jaw was set like stone. His gaze swept the club, moving from the bar to the raised VIP area, then to the dark hall leading to the private rooms. Without looking at Olivia, he asked, "Which one is he?" She knew exactly who he meant. Her throat was painfully dry. The man in the black suit, near the couches. Race gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Stay right behind me." He moved forward, and Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs. This was real. It was finally happening. A part of her wanted to stop him, to say she had changed her mind, that this confrontation would solve nothing. But her legs carried her forward, trailing him through the crowd toward the very man who had tossed her out like trash into the rain. Senor spotted them from 10 feet away. His smile never wavered. In fact, it grew wider. He excused himself from a woman draped in gold and stepped toward them, his arms open in a false welcome. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice polished by practice. He did not recognize Olivia at all. His focus was entirely on Ree, trying to assess his importance. Ree came to a halt directly in front of him. "You are in charge of this place?" "I am the manager, yes." Senor's smile became a professional mask. "Are you interested in a table? Our VIP section is at capacity tonight, but I can certainly." "I am not interested in a table." A cold edge in Ree's voice gave Senor pause. The smile stayed, but his eyes grew sharp. "In that case, what can I do for you? You can explain who authorized you to fire my employee." The smile shattered. Senor's eyes darted to Olivia for a second, then snapped back to Ree. Understanding dawned, followed by deep confusion. "I am sorry. Who are you?" "Camilo Ree." The name landed like a punch. All the color drained from Senor's face. His confidence vanished so quickly that Olivia almost pitied him. Almost. His mouth moved, but no words came out. "Senor Ree, I was not aware you were." "You were not aware I was coming," Camilo corrected him. "And that is the problem." "Yes. Of course. I only meant—" Senor tried to straighten his posture, to piece his professional facade back together. He glanced around the club, searching for support that would not arrive. "Is there an issue? Was there a complaint? I assure you, whatever the problem is, I can resolve it." "Her." Camilo nodded toward Olivia, his eyes never leaving Senor's face. "Why is she no longer working here?" Senor finally gave her a proper look. A real one. A series of emotions flashed across his face. Shock, annoyance, fury, and then a creeping panic as he realized she was with the owner. He cleared his throat. "She was not a good match for our staff." "For what reason?" "She was unwilling to perform additional duties." "What duties?" Senor paused. The bass from the music vibrated around them. Guests were beginning to notice the tense exchange. The woman in gold was gone. Two bartenders had stopped pouring drinks to stare. "This establishment provides more than beverages," Senor said, choosing his words with care. "We offer entertainment, exclusive services for our most valued clients." She had no interest in being a part of that. "She is a waitress," Camillo stated, his voice flat. She was a waitress. The contract she signed was for serving drinks. Senor blinked. "Yes, but—" "So you dismissed her for refusing to violate her contract. It is not so simple. It is precisely that simple." Camillo's voice remained low, yet it sliced through the club's noise. "You coerced an employee into providing services of a sexual nature." She said no. "You then evicted her and threw her onto the street without pay or notice. Is that a correct summary?" Senor's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, Senor Ree, you do not grasp how this industry operates." "I grasp it perfectly." Camillo took a single step forward. "What I do not grasp is who told you that this was acceptable. No one told me. I operate the club in the way that is most effective, the way that generates profit. My profit. Yes, your profit, which I have been increasing monthly by taking advantage of women who came here for a job, not to be put up for sale." The charge hung heavy in the air. Senor's face turned red. "That is not accurate. These girls understand the arrangement when they start. They desire the work. They earn very good money. She is the only one who has ever raised an issue, because she is the only one who refused. She is the only one foolish enough to believe a club like this survives on pouring drinks." The words were sharp and defensive. The moment they left his mouth, Senor seemed to grasp his error. His eyes widened. He took a small step back. Camillo's expression remained unchanged. "Shut off the music." "What?" "Shut off the music." Senor looked around in a panic before gesturing to someone Olivia could not see. 10 seconds later, the music died. The sudden quiet was stunning. Every person in the club turned to look at them. Camillo spoke just loud enough for his voice to travel. "Everyone, leave now." Nobody moved. The crowd just stared at Camillo as if he were speaking a foreign language. A faint echo of the music still hummed from the speakers, a ghost of the rhythm that had been shaking the floor. Someone near the bar laughed with unease. A glass clinked. Camillo did not repeat the order. He took his phone from his pocket, touched a single button, and lifted it to his ear. His eyes stayed locked on Senor. "Clear the building," he said in Portuguese. "All of them, you have 2 minutes." He hung up. That was when people understood something serious was happening. Security guards emerged first, not the pair from the entrance, but 6 others, perhaps more. They appeared from the shadows as if they had been waiting, moving through the patrons with quiet efficiency. They guided people to the exits with firm voices and even firmer grips. "Let us go. It is time to leave. The club is closed. Everybody out. Move along." At first, the crowd balked. There were confused protests and half-full drinks left behind. A few people shouted in anger, but the guards were not there to negotiate. In 60 seconds, the dance floor was clearing. In 90 seconds, the bar was deserted. The woman in gold snatched her purse and rushed out without a backward glance. Olivia stood motionless beside Camilo, watching the club empty like a draining sink. Women she had worked with walked past, some in uniform, others in the revealing clothes Senor required for his special entertainment. A few of them met her eyes. Most did not. Senor's fear was now plain to see. His hands trembled. Sweat formed on his forehead, ignoring the cold air. "Senor Ree, please, if I have caused some offense, be silent." Senor's mouth clamped shut. The last of the patrons were herded out. The guards stationed themselves at the exits, arms crossed, faces unreadable. One of them bolted the main door from the inside. The loud click echoed in the silent club. Camillo looked over the empty room, at the abandoned glasses and the fog machine still puffing mist over the floor. He walked toward the bar, his hands in his pockets, observing every detail. Olivia followed him, unsure what else to do. Senor remained frozen in place, his bravado completely gone. Camillo paused at the bar and ran a finger over the cool marble. "What is the monthly revenue for this place?" Senor stammered. "Around 200,000 reais, sometimes higher in certain months." "And what portion of that is from alcohol sales?" Silence. "What portion?" Camillo asked again. "Perhaps 30%. So 70% is from the girls." Senor swallowed with difficulty. "The entertainment offerings are extremely popular. We have high-level clients. Discretion is absolute. It is a very profitable business model." "I was not asking for a sales presentation." Camillo turned to look at him. "I was asking for the figures." 70%? "Yes, approximately." "And what is the percentage you pay the girls?" 20% of their earnings, plus their tips, 20% of money they make for you by selling their bodies. They operate as independent contractors. They select their own clients. They establish their own rules. Everything is consensual." Camilo gave a cold laugh. "Except for when it is not. Except for when a woman says no and you discard her. She was not one of the entertainers. She was an employee with a contract who performed her duties, and you punished her for refusing a duty she never signed up for." Camilo moved closer. "Where is her room?" "Upstairs. The second floor." "But her personal items are—" "Show me." Senor looked as though he might be sick. "Of course. This way." He guided them down a rear hallway, past the restrooms and a supply closet, to a tight staircase Olivia knew all too well. She had gone up those steps every night for 8 months, bone-tired and sore, thankful just to have a room with a lock. The second floor was darker and more hushed, a long hall lined with doors. Some were ajar, showing tiny rooms just big enough for a single bed. Others were shut, with muffled sounds leaking out. Low voices, quiet music, the steady creak of a mattress. A knot formed in Olivia's chest. She had lived alongside this. She had heard this every single night. Senor paused at a door near the end of the hall. This one was hers. "Open it," Camilo commanded. Senor fumbled with a ring of keys, found the right one, and turned the lock. The door swung open. The room was bare. It was not just missing her things, it was completely gutted. The bed was gone. The lamp was gone. Even the curtain rail over the window had been removed. There was nothing but stark walls and a cold concrete floor. "Where are her things?" Camilo spoke with a menacing softness. "I had it taken out. It is routine when an employee is let go." "And where is it?" "In the storage room, on the lower level." "I can go get it." "You sent her away with nothing?" "She left with a suitcase." "I watched her leave. A single suitcase. For 8 months of service. Just one." Camilo faced Olivia. "Is he telling the truth?" She could only nod, her throat tight. Camilo surveyed the bare room for a heavy moment before stepping back into the hall. He took out his phone and dialed another number. "I require a complete review," he commanded. "The Eclipse Lounge, starting now. Every agreement, every transaction, every woman on the payroll. I need to know their names, their ages, their start dates, and the terms of their original employment." He stopped, absorbing the reply. "No, I am not leaving. Get the team here immediately." After disconnecting, he fixed his gaze on Senor. "You will be waiting downstairs to cooperate with their inquiry. And if I discover you have been involved with underage girls or forcing women into this work, no one will ever find you." The color drained from Senor's face. "I promise, all the women are of age. They all agree to be here. My business is completely legitimate." "You have no business," Camilo said, his tone freezing. "You are an employee who overstepped his authority. Now you will face the consequences of misusing that power." He signaled to a security man. "Escort him to the office below. Confine him there. No departing. No phone calls. No communication with anyone before my team gets here." "Understood, Senor." The guard took hold of Senor's arm. Senor started to object, but quickly decided against it. He allowed himself to be guided away, his posture defeated. all resistance gone from him. Once the hall was empty, Camillo's attention fell on Olivia. "You stayed in this place for 8 months?" she confirmed with a nod. "Hearing those sounds each night," he said, motioning to the doors along the corridor. "Yes," her voice broke, "and I always refused. I am not one of them. I only serve drinks." "You are stronger than that," he stated plainly, as if it were an undeniable truth. "Most would have given in. You resisted." Olivia was speechless. She felt empty, emotionally exhausted. The events of the last 2 hours seemed like a dream. The downpour, the black vehicle, this entire showdown. Seeing Senor completely fall apart before the owner he betrayed. "What will happen to me?" she whispered. Camillo glanced down the corridor and then met her eyes. "My job is to fix this disaster. Your job is to choose your next step." "My next step? You cannot remain in this place. Your living quarters are gone, as is your position. However, you are entitled to 8 months of pay for the duties you declined, along with a payment for wrongful dismissal and damages for the suffering you endured." He took out his device and made a quick calculation. "Let us say 50,000 reais." The strength almost left Olivia's legs. 50,000, he went on. "Or there is another option. You remain here. Assist me in identifying other victims. Provide a statement if it becomes necessary, and I will personally guarantee your safety throughout the process." She looked at him in disbelief. "Why would you offer me that?" "Because out of everyone employed here, you were the one who was honest." His gaze was direct. "And I have to understand the full extent of this problem." A clap of thunder sounded from outside. In that moment, Olivia came to a decision. "I will assist you." Camillo gave a single, sharp nod. "Then we should return to the lower level. My team is about to arrive, and they need to hear your entire story." The office was more confined than Olivia had imagined. Senor was seated at a messy desk, his hands clasped and his face ashen. A pair of guards flanked the entrance, their arms folded and their faces impassive. The air was thick with the scent of old smoke and costly liquor, with a nearly finished bottle reflecting the glow of the lamp. Camillo stood by the window, observing the street where dark cars started pulling up to the curb. They were his investigators, the team he summoned. Olivia watched them through the window. Professionals in dark business attire emerged with computers and document cases, their movements precise and coordinated like a military unit. She was on a simple metal chair facing Senor, her work clothes still wet, the apron around her waist a constant reminder of her humiliation. Her single suitcase was on the floor beside her, holding all her worldly possessions. 5 minutes had passed without a word from Camillo. The quiet was more oppressive than any yelling could be. It filled the space with a heavy pressure that made it hard to breathe. Senor's eyes darted toward him, then away, and back, anticipating a sign. A signal to talk. A chance to justify himself. At last, Camillo moved away from the window. "How many years have you been in my employment?" he inquired. Senor coughed lightly. 3 years, Senores. "And during that period, how many visits have I made to this establishment?" "This would be your first visit." "The very first time," Camillo repeated, letting the words hang in the air, "which means you assumed I was indifferent to the activities in this place." "No, not at all. I simply believed I was acting in your best interest, boosting revenue, expanding the enterprise by making it a house of ill repute." "It is not a house of ill repute," Senor interjected. "It is an exclusive club offering extra amenities, upscale, private, and fully compliant with the law." "Compliant?" Camillo's tone was devoid of emotion. "You seem fond of that term, but lawful is not the same as moral, nor is it the same as approved. I was granted autonomy in my management. The last district supervisor told me. What he told you is irrelevant." Camillo moved from the wall to the desk. "What you have done is what matters. How many women are presently assigned to the rooms on the upper floor? Senor paused. 15. Perhaps 16. You are not certain. They rotate. They work for themselves. How many have contracts similar to hers? Camillo gestured at Olivia. How many were brought on as servers only to be coerced into other things? Silence. Tell me how many. Camillo slapped his hand on the desk. The sound was not loud, but it was sudden enough to make Senor jump. I am not sure. A handful, possibly 5 or 6, began as waitstaff before moving into new roles. Moving into new roles, Camillo echoed. What a delicate way to phrase it. They desired that kind of job. It pays more. No one was compelled. Olivia's fists tightened on her knees. The falsehood was so effortless, so rehearsed, it was as if he had repeated it enough to convince himself of its truth. She is in this very room, Camillo noted softly, and she will inform me if you are being dishonest. Senor's gaze shot to Olivia. She met it without flinching. He is lying, she stated, her voice steadier than she anticipated. I was not the only person. A young woman named Beatrice was here. We were bartenders together for 2 months. Then suddenly, she was working on the second floor. I questioned her about it. She told me she was given no other option. That is a fabrication, Senor interrupted. Beatrice approached me requesting additional shifts. I presented her with a chance to earn more, and she took it. I found her weeping in the restroom the following week. Olivia pressed on. She confessed she was desperate for the income because you claimed the bar was not profitable enough to justify her hours unless she took on extra duties upstairs. That is a distortion of the facts. Is Beatrice currently employed here? Camillo demanded. No, Senor conceded. She departed roughly 1 month ago. Did she depart, or did you dismiss her? She simply ceased coming to work. Camillo's jaw clenched. He retrieved his phone, typed a message, and then addressed a guard. Locate her. I need her complete name, last residence, and contact number. I intend to speak with her this evening. The guard acknowledged and exited the room. Camillo refocused on Senor. Name the others. I am not sure what you. Who else did you manipulate? Who else accepted a proper job here and was forced into those rooms with threats against their employment? Nobody. I promise, all the other women understood what they were agreeing to. In that case, you will have no objection to me speaking with them. Camillo started for the doorway. Because my investigators are preparing to question every woman who works here. And should a single one of them share a narrative similar to hers, he indicated Olivia, our next discussion will take place in a far less pleasant setting. At that, Senor's self-control shattered entirely. I beg you, Senor Race, I was only attempting to operate a successful establishment. The expenses here are immense. The cost of the alcohol permit itself is. I am not concerned with your expenses. Camillo's voice sliced through the excuses. I am concerned that you used my resources, my building, and my reputation to take advantage of women who believed you would respect their agreements. It was not taking advantage. She would be on the street right now. She was walking in a storm without a place to sleep because you evicted her for declining to sell her body, Camillo retorted, his tone sharp as a blade. That is not commerce. It is viciousness. The final word filled the silence. A weight lifted from Olivia's chest. At last, someone was saying it. Someone was calling the abuse by its proper name. For 8 months, they called her naive. They said she did not grasp how things worked. They claimed her boundaries were absurd. Now, someone confirmed she was right all along. A sharp rap on the door broke the moment. A guard pulled it open. A woman in a slate-gray suit entered, holding a tablet and a leather folder. She looked to be in her 50s, with short silver hair and keen eyes that assessed the room in an instant. Mr. Race, she acknowledged with a nod. Gabriella. Camillo stood taller. Give me the status. We have secured every file, all financial records, the employment contracts, and security footage from the last 6 months. The women are being questioned in separate rooms. We have also engaged legal counsel and notified local authorities to ensure proper documentation of everything. Excellent. What is the total number of women? 23 are currently on the property. 19 are over the age of 18. 4 of them. She looked at Senor, indicating problems with their records. Camilo's face grew dark. What sort of problems? Identification that does not align with their claimed ages. One woman who says she is 22 has a birth certificate indicating she is 17. The atmosphere in the room grew cold. Camilo turned with deliberate slowness to look at Senor. You employed minors? No, absolutely not. I reviewed every single ID. If a person lied about their age, that is not my responsibility. You did not verify. It was a statement, not a question. I did verify. I possess copies of it all. If someone used a forged ID, there was no way for me to know. You did not verify, Camilo said again, because you chose not to know. Senor's mouth opened, then shut, then opened once more. No sound emerged. Gabriella cleared her throat. Should I inform the authorities about the minors right away and move them to a secure location? Medical attention, therapy, anything they require. I want a complete record showing. We offered our full cooperation the instant we learned of this issue. Understood. She departed, the sound of her heels echoing down the corridor. Camillo looked directly at Olivia. Did you have any idea about the younger ones? I had suspicions, she admitted in a low voice. There was one girl who seemed far too young. I asked her age one time. She told me 19. But her expression, she looked like she was not telling the truth. Did you report this? To who? He was the one in charge of the club. She motioned toward Senor. And I was struggling just to keep my own position. Camilo gave a slow nod. You did what was possible. I should have done something more. You endured. That is more than enough. He walked toward the door, then stopped. I need you to document everything. Every woman you can recall who appeared to be forced. Every discussion, every intimidation, every single detail. Okay, Gabriella will assist you. Do not rush. Be precise. He gave Senor one final look. And then we are shutting this operation down for good. Senor's face turned a deathly white. You cannot do that. This establishment generates. I do not care what it generates. This ends tonight. The interviews continued for 4 hours. Olivia sat with Gabriella in a small office off the main hall, documenting all she could recollect. Names, faces, conversations exchanged in hushed tones in restrooms and on back staircases. Women who had come full of hope and departed shattered. Women who had forced smiles through their tears. Women who had ceased to smile at all. Her hand began to ache after the first hour, but she continued writing. Gabriella posed questions, sometimes clarifying points, requesting timelines, and making notes on her tablet with quick, methodical taps. She did not interrupt without reason or hurry the process. She simply listened with the intense focus of a person who had done this work before. From outside the room, Olivia could hear activity, doors opening and shutting, muffled talk, and the soft sound of people being led through the building. The women were all being interviewed one by one. Each was paired with a member of Camilo's team. Nobody was permitted to depart until they had provided a statement. Around midnight, Gabriella's phone vibrated. She looked at the display and then got to her feet. I have to go check on something. Continue writing. I will return shortly. Olivia nodded, stretching her fingers before she took up the pen once more. She wrote about Beatrice, who had wept in the bathroom and then vanished a month later. She wrote about Carla, who was hired to be a cocktail server and now serviced the VIP rooms with empty eyes and a mechanical smile. She wrote about the girl whose name she never knew, who appeared to be 16 but swore she was 19. She wrote about the evening Senor had trapped her in the supply closet. His voice had been friendly, but his intention was perfectly clear. You could earn triple your current pay. Clients ask for you. You are wasting your potential. She wrote about his change in behavior after her refusal, how her work shifts became longer, how her tips began to shrink without explanation, how the other employees began to shun her as if her defiance was infectious. She wrote about the women who had attempted to caution her. Just give him what he wants. It is the easier path. Resisting him just makes everything worse. She wrote until her hand trembled and her vision blurred. Gabriella came back with coffee and a sandwich that Olivia had no memory of requesting. Eat, Gabriella said in a gentle tone. You have been doing this for hours. Olivia accepted the coffee but could not bring herself to eat the food. How many of the women have you spoken with? 17 at this point. There are 6 more left. Gabriella's expression hardened. And you were not the only one he targeted, not even close. The validation should have brought Olivia a sense of justice. Instead, it just left her feeling weary, heartbroken, and furious with herself for not taking more action when she had the opportunity. The younger ones? She asked softly. All 4 of them are being moved to a safe house this evening. Medical evaluations are scheduled for tomorrow. We have reached out to their families when we could. Gabriella stopped for a moment. 2 of them are not from this state. They were lured here online with the promise of jobs in modeling. Olivia's stomach churned. Modeling. It was the classic language of traffickers. They arrive, their passports are taken for safekeeping. Then they suddenly owe money for living and travel expenses they never consented to pay. Gabriella's voice was detached and professional, but a deep anger was just beneath the surface. By the time they understand the reality of their situation, they are trapped. Did Senor know about this? He insists he did not. But ignorance is not a valid defense when you are managing an enterprise of this nature. He should have known. He simply chose to avoid the truth. The door opened. Camillo came inside. He wore the same suit, though his shirt was now more creased, with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He appeared tired, but not in a physical way. It was a profound exhaustion, the kind that comes from witnessing things that can never be unseen. How is she? He asked Gabriella. She has been extremely detailed. We have sufficient information to build a solid case. He nodded, then turned his gaze to Olivia. I need you to come with me. Her heart began to beat faster. To where? Upstairs. One of the women refuses to speak unless you are present. Olivia put her pen down. Which one is it? She would not provide her name. She only said that she knew you, and that you had been kind to her. Olivia rose to her feet, her legs feeling stiff after sitting for so long. She followed Camillo from the room, down the corridor, and past security personnel and members of the audit team. They were moving through the building like surgeons excising a disease. They went up the rear staircase to the second floor. The hallway looked different now. It was empty and silent. Doors were left open, showing rooms in different states of disarray. Unmade beds, clothes thrown about, makeup bags left open on dressers. The women had been relocated downstairs for their interviews. What was left behind felt like evidence, proof of what this establishment truly was. Camillo paused at a door near the end of the hall, 3 doors down from where Olivia's own room once was. He tapped gently on the door. It is me. I am with her. After a pause, a faint voice answered. Okay. When Camo pushed the door open, Olivia instantly knew the girl sitting on the cramped bed. She had a youthful face, and her dark hair was gathered in a sloppy ponytail. She wore a baggy sweatshirt, a clear violation of the club's required attire. Her eyes, red from weeping, lifted as they came in. Olivia, she breathed. Lucia. Olivia stepped forward, her voice soft. Are you all right? Lucia simply shook her head. They are asking me things, but I do not know the right answers. I am afraid of getting into trouble. You are not in trouble, Camo stated from the doorway. We are here to help. But I falsified my application. I claim to be 21, but I am only 19. If they find out, they will know I used a fake identification. Olivia sat beside her on the bed. A fake identification is not why we are here. That is not the issue. Then what is the issue? Olivia looked to Camo, who gave a slight nod, granting her permission to be truthful. This is about preventing what happened to me from happening to anyone else, Olivia explained. Senor is under investigation for exploitation. He pressured girls into services they never agreed to and fostered a dangerous environment. We must find out who else he harmed. Lucia's fingers knotted together in her lap. He did not harm me. This was my choice. Was it? Olivia questioned softly. Or did you apply for a waitressing job and get trapped here with no other way out? There was a long silence. Then, in a low voice, she said, "He told me I was not earning enough in tips. He said I was losing the club money. He said if I wanted to keep my job, I had to contribute in other ways." When did this happen? 2 months ago, just after you began declining requests for the private rooms. Lucia looked up, fresh tears streaming down her face. I saw what he did to you. I saw how he treated you when you refused. So when he approached me, I did not resist. I simply agreed. A tightness formed in Olivia's throat. I am so sorry. This is not your fault. You showed great courage. I had to have the job. I had to have the income. My mother is ill, and I send funds to her each week. If I were to lose this position, I had no idea what I would do. Where is your home? Camo inquired. Bahia. It is a small town with no jobs. That is the reason I moved to the city. And Senor was aware of this. Lucia nodded. He was aware of everyone's situation. He knew which of us were desperate, which had debts, and which could not risk saying no. Her voice became a whisper. That was his method for choosing. A hush fell over the room. Camillo took out his phone and typed. When he next spoke, his tone was deliberate and measured. Lucia, I am about to ask you something, and I require a completely honest answer. Did Senor or any other person in this club ever use physical force against you? No. Not force, but what was it? He made it understood that refusal was not a real choice. He ensured that girls who did not comply were quickly gone. I witnessed what became of those who tried to quit. Their wages were withheld. Their job references vanished. A girl attempted to report him, and suddenly she was unemployable everywhere in the city. He ruined her reputation. I do not know the term for it. I only know that she returned to her hometown with absolutely nothing. Camilo's jaw clenched. He turned to Olivia. Were you aware of this? I had heard whispers, but I never had any confirmation. He gave a slow nod before turning his attention back to Lucia. I need you to write down every detail you have shared with me. The names of other coerced girls, abusive clients, and anyone who assisted Senor in this scheme. Are you able to do that? Lucia wavered. What comes next? Next, this establishment is closed for good. Senor will be held accountable, and you will receive all the money you are owed, along with compensation for what you endured. And after that? Where will I go? You can go wherever you choose. I will see to it that you have sufficient funds for a new beginning. Somewhere secure and a long way from this place. Lucia's eyes met Olivia's. Can you trust him? Olivia's mind went to the vacant club downstairs, the team of auditors, the speed with which Camo had shattered Senor's composure, the memory of him stopping his car in a downpour for a stranger who had nothing to give him. Yes, she replied. I trust him. Lucia drew a shaky breath. All right, I will write it all down. By 3 a.m, the Eclipse Lounge resembled a crime scene. Not from any physical altercation, there had been none, but from the discoveries of the investigation. The hallway outside Senor's office was lined with file boxes. The glow of laptop screens filled every flat surface. Gabriella's people were silent and methodical, checking documents, marking inconsistencies, and constructing a case that would be unbreakable in court. Olivia sat in the main lounge, observing the entire operation. The colorful neon signs were dark, and the smoke machine was off. Devoid of the music, the people, and the manufactured excitement, the room felt cramped and mournful, like a theater after the final curtain. Camo stood by the bar, his phone held to his ear, speaking quickly in Portuguese to a person who clearly did not like what he was hearing. His tone was level but absolute. This is final. The revenue forecasts do not matter to me. Your approval from 3 years ago does not matter to me. This business is finished as of tonight. No, a discussion is not possible because I am the owner of this building, and I am declaring that it is over. He disconnected the call without awaiting a reply. Gabriella came to him holding a tablet. We have finished with all the interviews. We spoke with a total of 23 women. 14 were brought on under false pretenses, or forced into services that were not in their original agreements. 4 of them are underage. The last 5 assert they agreed to the terms willingly, but 2 of them show evidence that points to human trafficking. What sort of evidence? One is trapped by debt. A girl is indebted to the club for 30,000 reais for housing and training expenses she claims she never consented to. Another woman's passport was taken from her upon her arrival from Colombia. She has not had it since. Camo's face grew stern. Where are their papers? They are locked inside Señor's desk. We discovered 12 passports. Only 6 of them belong to girls who are currently employed here. The other 6 are unaccounted for. They might belong to girls who have left, or it could be something much worse. A dark possibility settled in the room. Camo put his phone down. I need a full forensic audit of all financial records for the past 3 years. Every single payment made to the girls, every charge to a client, every listed expense. If there is money missing, I demand to know its destination. That is already underway, but Señor maintained a double ledger, one for the record and one that was concealed. We are working to decrypt the hidden files now. How much time? A couple more hours. Possibly less. Camo nodded. And what of Señor? He remains in the office. He has asked for a lawyer. He is free to ask for anything. He will not exit this building before we have obtained everything necessary. Gabriella looked from Olivia back to Camo. There is one more thing you need to know. What is it? 3 of the women spoke of a regional manager. He visits once per month, takes cash payments, and never reveals his name. Their description was of an older man, always dressed well, with a scar on his left hand. A complete stillness came over Camilo. Augusto, you are familiar with him? His job was to supervise the operations in this territory, to ensure the locations were clean, lawful, and profitable. His tone became frozen. Instead, he was taking payments to ignore what was happening. Should I include him in the investigation? Involve him in every aspect. I want to see every property under his management, every contract he has handled, and every individual he has corrupted. If this is happening here, it is happening in other places. Gabriella wrote a note. This will become much larger than a single club. I am aware. Camilo surveyed the empty room. That is the reason it must be exhaustive. Fixing one place while leaving the others untouched only relocates the issue. I have to demolish the entire structure and start over the right way. Olivia observed him from the other side of the room. He was clearly the architect of a vast enterprise. She saw it in the efficiency of his team, in their unquestioning deference to his command, in how one phone call could clear out an entire building. Yet, this was the same person who had stopped for a weeping stranger in a storm. She could not comprehend him. Perhaps that was the whole idea. Gabriella departed to organize the forensic unit. Camilo crossed the room to where Olivia was seated, his hands in his pockets. The fatigue was finally visible in his eyes. It is time for you to go home, he told her. I have nowhere to live. He stopped for a moment. Right. I forgot about that. It will be okay. I can figure something out until... No. You have provided us with everything we required. All that remains is paperwork. He took out his phone and typed a message. I am arranging a hotel for you, a place that is clean and safe. You can get some rest there. I do not want your charity. This is not charity. It is payment for your professional assistance. For the last 6 hours, you have been a consultant on this matter. He turned the phone to show her. It was a confirmation of a bank transfer. 50,000 reais. That is the amount I committed to. There is also an additional 20,000 for helping with the interview tonight. Olivia could only stare at the total. 70,000 reais. It was more than she had earned in 2 years. I cannot take this money. It is already done. The transfer is complete. To what account? You never had my banking information. Gabriella found it in Senor's records. He put his phone back in his pocket. Think of it as compensation for the 8 months of misery he put you through. Her hands trembled. This is far too much. It is not nearly enough, but it is a beginning. He motioned to a guard standing by the exit. Raphael is going to drive you to the hotel. You can stay there for as long as you require. When you feel prepared to think about your next steps, give me a call. He offered her a business card made of thick paper with raised letters, showing only a name and a telephone number. What happens if I do not call? Olivia questioned. Then that is your choice. The money belongs to you regardless. You are not indebted to me. Why are you helping me like this? Camillo studied her for a long, quiet moment. Because you abandoned everything you had, rather than sacrifice who you are. Very few people possess that kind of integrity. Those who do should be protected, not broken. I am not special. You just chose to walk in the rain with no destination rather than sell a piece of your soul. In my line of work, that makes you exceptional. He took a step back. Raphael will see that you are taken care of. Get some rest. We can speak tomorrow if you decide to, or we can never speak again. The choice is yours. Camilo turned to go, but then he stopped. What will happen to the others? The girls with nowhere to go, they get the same thing you do. Money, housing, support, a new job if they want one, and counseling if they need it. No one is left on the street, not under my protection, not anymore. And Senor? The warmth left Camilo's face. Senor is about to find out that stealing my money is a costly mistake. But stealing a woman's dignity... He shook his head. That mistake will strip him of everything. Olivia knew he meant it. Raphael appeared beside her. He was young, professional, and wore the same dark suit as the other men. Ready, Senora? She rose, her legs weak after sitting for hours. Her work clothes were finally dry, but were still creased, still reeking of the club. She wanted to throw them in a fire. As Raphael guided her to the exit, Olivia glanced back. Camillo was standing by the bar, the phone back at his ear. He was issuing commands that would shake his entire organization. They would root out corruption, enforce accountability, and burn away the decay so something new could rise. He had stopped for her in the downpour, but not out of simple kindness. Maybe he was in his own fashion, but this was about principle. There were lines he refused to cross, a code that even men with power had to respect, and when that code was violated, he did not turn his head. He acted. Outside, the storm had finally passed. The sky had started to brighten. It was not quite morning, but it was coming. In the gray pre-dawn light, the city looked altered, more quiet, nearly tranquil. Raphael opened the door to a black car. It was different from the SUV, but it felt the same, immaculate, costly, and safe. The hotel is 20 minutes from here, he said. You can rest in the car if you like. Olivia slipped into the rear seat, with her canvas bag at her side. She had 70,000 reais in a bank account she had hardly ever used. As the sedan pulled away from the Eclipse Lounge, she watched its reflection disappear in the side mirror. The neon light was out. Its doors were chained shut. Inside, Camillo's people were taking it apart, one piece at a time. By the next day, it would no longer exist. And Olivia Peters, the waitress, the one who refused, the survivor, would find herself waking in a pristine bed with enough money to begin again, far from this place, in a safe haven of her own choosing. Dawn arrived over the metropolis like a spreading bruise, purple and gray bleeding out to a faint yellow. Olivia opened her eyes in a hotel room that smelled of lavender and clean linen. For an instant she was lost. Then the memories came back in a rush. The storm, the SUV, Camillo's expression in the dark. the methodical dismantling of the eclipse. She sat up and reached for her phone. It was 7:43 a.m. She had missed calls from a number she did not know. A text message from Gabriella said, "Investigation complete. Call when you are awake." Olivia dialed. Gabriella answered on the very first ring. "Did you get any rest?" "Better than I have in a very long time." "Good to hear. Are you able to return to the lounge? There is something Senor Reyes wants you to witness." A short while later, Raphael was escorting her back through the crush of morning traffic. In the daylight, the city seemed transformed. It was less threatening, more detached. Just concrete and glass, full of people racing to jobs that would slowly wear them down. When they pulled up to the Eclipse, Olivia barely knew the place. The neon sign had vanished, leaving only empty brackets and stray wires. Official papers covered the front windows, citations, orders to close, and seizure notices. A handful of onlookers had collected on the sidewalk. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones, trying to piece together the events. Raphael guided her in through a side entry. Inside, the club was just a shell. The bar was stripped clean, its bottles and glassware packed away. Even the mirrors were gone. The DJ booth stood empty, and the VIP area was disassembled. Laborers in overalls were ripping up the carpets, uncovering stained cement beneath them. In the middle of the dance floor stood Camillo, studying the ruin like a general surveying a conquered city. He turned as Olivia came in. "You made it. Gabriella said you asked for me. I wanted you to witness this." He indicated the gutted interior with a sweep of his arm. "So, you would know this is permanent. It is gone for good." Olivia moved slowly through the area, past the barren bar where she had worked for 8 months. She walked past the hall leading to the steps she had gone up every single night. Everything that had seemed unchangeable just 12 hours earlier was being dismantled. "What happened to the girls?" she asked. "They are in safe houses and hotels. 3 went back to their families. 2 are speaking with social services this afternoon. The younger ones are with Child Protective Services." He paused. "Lucia asked about you. She wanted to confirm you were safe. I should give her a call." "Good. She would like that." Camillo produced his phone and sent a quick message. "I just sent her number to you." Gabriella walked out of the back office holding a box of records. She set it down gently. "The final total is 147,000 reais in cash that was never reported. There is another 200,000 from wages that were stolen and debts that were invented." "And what about Senor?" Olivia asked. "Is he being taken to a federal facility within the hour?" Gabriella responded. "He is facing charges for money laundering, human trafficking, coercion, and fraud. He will be fortunate to see the outside world again in the next 10 years. "What about Augusto, the regional manager?" Camillo's expression became rigid. "He is next on the list. We have discovered 6 other establishments running the same scheme. He supervised all of them, and they all profited from abuse." 6. Olivia's voice was quieter than she wanted. "6 that we have uncovered so far. Our review is not over." He looked straight at her. "This is about more than one lounge, Olivia. It is a sickness in the system, and it is over now." An employee holding a clipboard approached them. "Senor Reyes, the demolition team is standing by. Do we have permission to start?" "Start what?" Olivia inquired. Camillo's jaw set firmly. "A complete structural renewal. We are gutting the entire second floor. Every room, every wall, every surface that was used to cause harm. You are tearing it all down. I am erasing it." His voice was cold as steel. "When this place reopens, if it ever does, it will be transformed. It will be clean. The Eclipse Lounge ceases to exist today." The employee waited for the order. Camillo nodded. "Start with the rooms upstairs. I want those to be the first to go." The employee left. Soon after, the sound of sledgehammers echoed throughout the space. Walls were breaking apart, Pieces were falling, the physical destruction of what had been a jail for so many women. Olivia felt a tightness in her chest release. Thank you. Your thanks are not necessary. You are the one who found the courage to resist. I am merely doing what I should have done long ago, which is to pay attention. You did not know what was going on in this place. I should have known. The responsibility is mine. He took out an envelope and held it out to her. This is for you. Inside, she found documents, legal forms, and the deed to a building. Olivia's hands were unsteady. What is this? It is the building where you lived before you came to the eclipse. I acquired it this morning. There is an apartment there for you now. It is paid for 1 year. After that, the apartment is yours if you choose to stay. I can't accept this. It is too much. It is not a gift. It is repayment. His voice grew slightly softer. You lost your apartment because I failed to supervise my own businesses. This is how I fixed that mistake. Tears started to well up in Olivia's eyes. Why are you going to all this trouble? Camilla was silent for a few seconds. My sister was trafficked when she was 19 years old. They promised her a job at a restaurant in Sao Paulo. She ended up in a circumstance very much like yours. But she lacked the power to resist. And by the time I managed to find her, his sentence trailed off. I did not reach her in time. She is still living, but she is a different person. She will never be whole again. I am so sorry. I promised myself after that day it would never happen again. Not in an enterprise I managed, not under my protection. He looked around the ruined club. I failed here, but I will not fail a second time. The hammers continued their work on the floor above. The sound was strangely comforting, like a release of pressure. What will you do now? Camillo asked. Olivia thought of the apartment, the money she now had, and the future that was suddenly available to her, like a door she once thought was sealed forever. I do not know yet, but I have a choice. That is more than enough. Camillo almost smiled. Yes, it is. The apartment was not large, but it was spotless. It had 1 bedroom, a kitchen with usable counter space, and windows that welcomed in natural sunlight. Olivia stood in the bare living room, her canvas bag on the floor, trying to accept that this place belonged to her. No longer would she share a wall with exploitation. No more music would bleed through at 3 a.m. There would be no men in the hall making propositions that were not really propositions. There was only silence, safety, and the power to choose. Her phone buzzed. It was Lucia. Hello, Olivia. The girl's voice was uncertain. Gabriella gave your number to me. I hope that is all right. Of course. How are you doing? I am scared, but I feel better. I think they have enrolled me in a program for job training and counseling. They promised to help me find a respectable job. That is good news. That is very good news. There was a pause. I wanted to say thank you. For what? For being with me last night. For speaking honestly when it was dangerous. I would not have spoken up if you had not been there. Olivia felt her throat tighten. You would have. You are more resilient than you know. I do not feel resilient. I did not either. But we both survived. That is what matters. Lucia breathed out, a little unsteady. Senor was arrested this morning. Did you know? I heard. Good. Model, I want him to suffer. The bitterness in her tone was unfamiliar. It was a healthy sound. I want all of them to suffer. They are going to. Camilla was ensuring that would happen. He is somewhat frightening. A small smile appeared on Olivia's face. Yes, but in a way that feels safe. They spoke for several more minutes, making vague plans to have coffee and promising to keep in touch. It was the delicate start of what could grow into a friendship. After Lucia ended the call, Olivia's feeling of isolation lessened. She used the rest of her day to turn the apartment into a home. A visit to a thrift shop provided a mattress, bedding, and some basic kitchenware. A trip to the market filled the refrigerator with actual food, a change from the leftover scraps she had lived on at the club. As night fell, the place had begun to feel like her own. Her phone buzzed again. An unfamiliar number. Hello, Is this Olivia Peters? The voice belonged to a woman. It was professional yet kind. Yes, it is. My name is Dr. Carvalho. I am a therapist who focuses on trauma recovery. Senor Reyes requested that I contact you. He has made arrangements for counseling if that is something you would like to explore. There is no pressure and no obligation. It is simply an available resource. Olivia slowly lowered herself onto her new-to-her sofa. He arranged that for me. Yes, he did. He is handling all the expenses. Your only decision is whether you wish to proceed. Yes, I believe I would like that. Excellent. I have a 2 o'clock opening tomorrow. Would that time work for you? Yes. Thank you very much. When the call was over, Olivia remained seated in the growing darkness, observing the city lights appear outside her window. She considered how her life had been completely transformed from just 24 hours earlier. She thought about how close she had come to simply vanishing. She realized that one simple question, "What happened to you?" had redirected her entire future. The first therapy session was more difficult than Olivia had anticipated. Dr. Carvalho posed questions that uncovered feelings she had worked hard to bury. They discussed personal boundaries, methods of survival, and the distinction between a decision and "You are not at fault for anything that happened," Dr. Carvalho said softly. "You do realize that, do you not?" Olivia was not certain that she did, but she was beginning to believe it. She finished the appointment feeling emotionally exposed, but also remarkably lighter, as if she had finally set down a heavy burden she never knew she was carrying. As she walked home, she went by the Eclipse Lounge. The structure was almost unrecognizable. Teams of construction workers were all over its facade. The garish pink and blue neon sign had vanished, replaced by stark white scaffolding. A large banner announced a future project, a community resource center, scheduled to open in the fall of 2026. Olivia stopped in her tracks. A resource center. Not another nightclub, not another commercial enterprise, but something designed to genuinely help others. She took out her phone, located Camo's number, and dialed it before she could change her mind. He picked up on the first ring. Olivia. Did you see the sign at the Eclipse? A center for resources with job training and legal support, and therapy services for individuals needing a new beginning. He paused. It felt fitting. It is. It is absolutely perfect. I am happy you feel that way, because I want you to help me manage it. Olivia's breathing hitched. What did you say? You understand what it feels like to need support with nowhere to find it. You have seen how the systems fail. Your insight would be invaluable in ensuring this center is effective. I am not qualified for that. You are far more qualified than you think. Just consider it. No pressure at all. She remained on the sidewalk, looking at the building that had nearly been her ruin. It was now being remade into a place that could rescue people. Okay, she said softly. I will consider it. By the time she ended the call, the sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the clouds in hues of orange and gold. Olivia Peters headed home to an apartment that belonged to her, with funds in an account that she managed, and a future full of possibilities she could freely choose. She walked with her head held high, her posture straight, and her eyes dry. The storm was over, and she was a survivor. More than a survivor, she had refused to be broken, refused to bend, and refused to believe that cruelty was a normal part of life. A single woman walking by herself in a downpour. A single man who cared enough to ask a question. A single corrupt system that crumbled when someone finally insisted on being heard. Some people are lost in the storm and never seen again. Others change the entire landscape because one person stopped to ask why. Olivia Peters had been both, and her journey was only starting. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful lessons and lasting value to our audience. Thank you for staying with this story to the very end. Your attention is what brings these narratives to life. If you are prepared for another meaningful story, simply tap the video appearing on your screen now. And before you leave, please drop a comment and give this story a rating from 1 to 10. I am very eager to read your feedback and connect with you there.